we live in a time where everyone is concerned about AI and automation, right? It's disrupting the market, it's disrupting the labor force. We're still trying to figure out what role AI and automation is going to play in our society and our economy and the market, and how it will affect different industries and how everything will transform. But nobody is actually talking about what is governing AI and automation, because AI and automation still, at the end of the day, is not on top of the food chain. Intent is. Think about it. Tools are becoming more democratized. Intelligence or artificial intelligence or automation is going to become more abundant. Distribution via technology is going to become more accessible. Speed via technology is going to become everywhere, right? Speed is everywhere. The outcomes still, though, are going to diverge massively for the users. And in fact, you're still going to see a major separation. That's going to happen. It probably could increase wealth divides, for example, social economic divides going forward. It might actually make a more imbalanced world. And the reason is because AI and automation could be perceived as a force. But at the end of the day, it's a force without direction. It's like a rocket without coordinates, speed with no map, volume with no signal. Force multiplies the direction that already exists. And that's why we can think of intent as direction over time, or a clear direction over time, or a coherent direction over time. That's not exactly a dictionary definition, but it is the through line that we're going to need to navigate this world. So where does this all come from? Okay, this is important, right? There's a hierarchy for all of this, okay? And the major pivot is going to be intent, and I'll tell you where it fits in, okay? So number one, right? Imagine you're sitting there, you got all of this access to all this stuff. What's the first thing that happens? Think about it. The first thing that happens, that maybe a thought, a feeling, or an intuition comes to your mind, okay? It could still be in your mind. You could be thinking about it for no rhyme or reason. The moment starts to change when it becomes an intent. An intent is sort of like commitment. Once that commitment is made, that's when everything starts rolling. And that's when things like agency, capability, and outcomes will be revealed. So, you got judgment, what you think or what is true, for example, right? You have intent, which is the actual intention to commit, or what you're going to commit to. And then you have agency, which is like the force, right? AI, automation fit there. The capability is now the tools that you're going to implement. And then you have the outcome, which is the results that you ultimately will get. So AI, automation, a subset of agency, or like those agentic models, for example, that could be running things with multiple computers and GPUs. Agency amplifies intent, but it will never replace it. That's the key thing. That is, once you understood the through line, as I mentioned earlier, that is how you now know to navigate throughout this world. Because in this world, we're seeing agency scale, and that's going to create more leverage, and leverage is increasing, and you're going to see more automation developed by this agency and leverage. And hopefully that's going to start moving capital. So what's interesting is this, is that as agency or as AI and automation increases, it will be the great revealer. It will reveal weak intent, and it will reveal strong and directionally coherent intent. And weak intent is going to collapse faster. Strong, directionally coherent intent is going to grow exponentially faster, or it will compound faster, because that is the true leverage of the agency of scaling AI and automation. Just like in financial leverage, right? Let's say you have this idea for an investment or a trade. You can utilize financial leverage. And if you are directionally, literally and figuratively, directionally correct, that financial leverage will amplify your intent. And if you are correct, you're going to have a gain, an unrealized or realized gain, depending on your intent, right? Your strategy. But if you are directionally incorrect, then more than likely you could see collapse, and then you potentially will receive a margin call. And the same principle and analogy applies to the use of AI and automation. Before we had lower leverage environments where those mistakes would have only compounded slowly. But now with AI and automation, we're going to see mistakes and successes compound instantly. So before, let's say if we wanted to bring an app to market, you'd need to have a whole team of engineers, and it could take some time to program something to deliver that app to the market. Now, through AI and automation, we might be able to deliver apps faster to the market with less necessity for engineering. But then the only question is this, is now that it's in the market, we're going to start to see, was that idea directionally coherent with the wants and needs of the marketplace, or was it directionally incorrect? And then that mistake will just be compounded instantly. So that's what's happening. And that should also tell you something, is that this is almost an obvious concept, but worth reminding, is that intelligence doesn't sit on top, right? As we know, analogously, there's plenty of smart people, but if they're not, in fact, there's many smart people and we're like, oh, what are you doing with your life, for example? And that is the difference. Intent is the commitment, right? So you might have the intelligence either through human intelligence or artificial intelligence. You might have that, and it might help you a bit, but it will be intent that will help you persist in order to implement and start to see the outcome, right? So you can be brilliant and you can drift, or you can be coherent with the right direction and you can instantly see the results because you committed to something. And then you started to use all the leverage of intelligence and automation in order to identify and see the outcome almost instantaneously. It's also so important to note that if your intent is constantly changing with the environment, that's just called a reaction. Right, guys? That's not actual intent. Intent, as I mentioned before, the through line, right, is a coherent direction. That coherent direction then starts to see the outputs that it has committed to based on the feedback loop of the environment that's it's interacting with. And because we're able to go from effectively idea to execution faster, and then to get to almost like a end product faster, product or service faster, then which is now being leveraged as it bypasses all the gatekeepers before, then we're actually leveraging the ability to see outcomes faster from basically idea to the market faster. And you're going to then start to see the divergence between people that are in the society that have the intent with directional coherence and committing to that, irrespective of the noise that are in the environment, right? Separating or creating the signal through all the noise to be directionally correct in order to identify the outcome. So that's the difference. It's sort of like having a solid thesis, solid business plan or idea, right? The first stages of all of that is the judgment, and then now the act to commit, and then starting to utilize all the resources like AI and automation, which now many people have access to, but it's how you're using it to execute on your directionally coherent idea to realize the outcome potentially faster, and then to see the compound effects of that. So intent, interestingly enough, which is a through line through all of this, it's not loud. It's not the thing that's getting all the attention right now, right? But it still governs everything else. And it is the key differentiator for humans, actually, to be able to distinguish themselves in this environment. Because it could be agency that's making all the noise, but it is intent that makes the direction. And with all of that leverage, it is only intent that accelerates whatever outcome that it will discover, either exponential or compounding growth, or immediate collapse, or drift. And here's what's interesting, as we know, is the more leverage that we actually have, the more coherent and stable and directionally correct the intent must be. And this is very much connected to the way people can think of markets, right? There's ups, downs, and swings. And it is going to be those that are right or on the right side of history that are able to ride it, utilizing all the leverage that they have now without having that affect them or without that causing a collapse in order to realize the compounding or exponential growth based on the initial judgment, then to pre-commit, and then to actually commit with intent. So that has actually been a massive training ground to think about where leverage is now shown. So leverage is shown now through AI and automation, which effectively is saving time as well and saving resources, increasing one's capability to realize the end result and outcome faster, unlike ever before. Because now we're going to have a whole bunch of access to intelligence, which will help us with pattern recognition, processing speed, and adaptation. But at the end of the day, it is intent that is providing the commitment, the stability, and the internal alignment. So, a way to think of it is like this: intelligence can help you optimize, but intent is what's going to help you stabilize, specifically globally, because we as an individual with that intent must interact with the market or the greater society. So you can have all of that, but can you hold the directional coherence and be correct in order to benefit from all of that intelligence leverage to recognize that globally? And you will now be able to do so faster than ever. And this is why when you listen to major tech CEOs like NVIDIA and like Elon and Tesla, and there was that truth post by Trump, right? Intelligence is the ability to predict the future. What all of these guys are kind of beating the bush around on is the very idea of intent, because they have all the access to the data centers and the AI and the leverage. The thing that is still missing, and it is the highest layer, which is the ability to interpret reality correctly. And your ability to interpret reality correctly determines whether your intent is going to be aligned with the truth. And the truth is actually more scarce than all the intelligence and resources in the world. So it is so vital that judgment cannot be flawed, because if it is, your intent will be misaligned and you will be directionally incoherent, and you will leverage and scale collapse at a much faster pace. But if you're able to interpret reality correctly and you are aligned with the truth, that is the most scarce resource on earth right now.